have so many lawsuits going on. I don't have any
You
idea
don't know.
when it is.
Fair enough. And that's the
Yeah.
one that I guess the Attorney General will be arguing on your behalf, obviously, and that has to do with the early voting. I know many of them do, but that's the Obama.
The Obama early voting. Here's what the Obama lawsuit is about. It's about the fact that we have allowed military voters to vote the last 3 days before the election, while the legislature passed a law prohibiting voting those last 3 days. The reason they passed a law was because for the first time ever, we're sending out all of these absentee ballot applications all over the state. So we'll have millions of ballots and ballot requests out there. And the boards of elections need some time before the election to make sure that they can account for where those ballots are, synchronize the voter rolls, so those paper poll books that go out to 9,600 precincts on election day are accurate, so we know who already has cast a ballot and who's eligible to cast one on election day. But they're under equal protection argument saying, well, you can't do this for military voters, although it's the only state in the nation where such a lawsuit exists. Military voters have these options in other states, but we're the only state that's facing a lawsuit.
Very good. And will you need to appear at that hearing?
No.
You won't. Jason, are you out there? Where'd your gentleman?
I don't know where he went.
I'm going to get that door. Can you get it, Jamar?
Yes.
Thank you, because I'm afraid it might get a little loud. We have a living Dayton show at noon, and people may be running through the studio and such. And I don't know. Thank you.
No problem.
So we have, I was just reading an article as I got here in Florida. The Justice Department, the judges said that 8 days of early voting with 96 hours of voting is adequate in Florida.
Let's talk about uniformity, because when you came out with the directive, what are we talking about, 2 months ago?
It was a little over a month ago. Here, the situation was this, that traditionally in Ohio, voters have been allowed, let me start over.
Fine.
Traditionally in Ohio, local boards of elections have set their own hours of operation and days of operation, for that matter, during that 35-day window. Well, what was happening is that some counties were staying open longer than other counties, and Democrats complained that many of those were Republican counties, and that was going to create a disadvantage for Democrats. And so what I did is take the unprecedented action to issue a directive making the rules same across all 88 counties in Ohio, meaning the same days of operation, the same hours of operation. And so Ohio, for the first time ever, all voters would be voting by the same rules, and I think that's a positive step forward for our system of elections.
Is that where it stands now, however? Because it seems like with this latest interaction with the judge, the federal judge there in Columbus, that Montgomery County may now actually get to use those 3 days prior to election date, November 6th.
Well, all counties will be operating under the same rules. That court case is on appeal at the Sixth Circuit. We will be issuing a directive at some point in time establishing standard hours of operation, because we don't want to revisit the same problem that had previously occurred, where you have some counties open a set number of hours and others operating under different rules. But it is easy to vote in Ohio. Voting starts 35 days before the election. You have over 750 hours to vote from home, where you can receive an absentee ballot, and 230 hours to vote in person.
Let me ask you, though, in terms of uniformity and this directive, why not? You took office in January 2011. People may wonder why you didn't set the directive then instead of now at a crucial time in terms of a major election.
Well, the answer to that is pretty easy. I did set uniform standards for voting across 88 counties as it relates to absentee ballots. But understand, it's been the tradition in Ohio that that counties set their own hours and days of operation. Frankly, if I'd have come out and did that and said, well, no, we're going to set them early, then people would have complained that I was overreaching with my authority. And so essentially what I did is I gave the local boards the ability to continue to set the hours, because why? I acknowledge that in some case, well, let's face it, they pay for this. This is not state funded. The local boards pay for their operations, and we have traditionally allowed them to manage those days and hours of operation to manage their budgets, because it's a costly matter. The more conveniences you provide, the more cost is associated with it. But when it became a controversial, when it became when it started to create a situation where unequal opportunity was being created for the voters of the state. I wanted to come in, level the playing field, make it fair, and set uniform hours across the state.
But it just seems like a really tough time to make those last-minute changes for these boards of
Well,
elections.
it is. Frankly, if you look at what I've tried to do, I asked the legislature to take that authority out of my hands. I asked them to pass a law setting in statute the days and the hours of operation, and they refused to do so. And so when you're the Secretary of State in one of the most hotly contested states in the country for a presidential election, you're just going to face these issues. There are people from outside of Ohio who are coming into Ohio trying to influence the outcome of our elections. And the goal for me is that I don't mind the controversy, but in taking action, I want to make sure that we're making it easy to vote, that we're making it fair to vote, and it's also secure, that we can make sure that we're not going to have issues like election fraud or anything that would threaten the integrity of our system of elections.
In making it fair, have we not further confused voters? I mean, it seems like there is a lot of confusion still and some things hanging in the balance. I know when I talk with the Montgomery County Board of Elections, their frustration is they want to get note cards out to folks, reminding them or even maybe informing them for the first time of a new polling spot and the hours
Sure.
of early voting, and yet they feel like they almost need to hold off or put a disclaimer based on these court hearings.
Well, that is, I share their concerns, but these are issues really out of my control. They're matters that the federal court is hearing right now. It's not something that I can provide any reassurance to them on until we get a ruling from the courts and the appeals process has run its course. The problem is that we have good rules in Ohio. We run good elections in Ohio. As a matter of fact, Ohio was one of 6 states that a recent study by Common Cause said is the best prepared to handle the issues related to the elections as we head into November. So we're in great shape. There will be a lot of controversy on the front end because the stakes are so high. Both political parties have tried to use the rules for how elections are run to gain some sort of political advantage. My job is to thwart those efforts and to make sure that the rules are fair, that they're not being manipulated for political purposes, and that all voters in the state have easy access to the polls and really feel like they're being treated fairly from county to county.
You're an elected official. How do you keep politics out of your job?
Well, I have been consistent and fair. One of the things that you can not like my rulings, and I respect that, but nobody can say that no matter how wealthy you are, no matter how, what minority group you belong to, what political party, everybody votes by the same rules in Ohio, and it's not subject to the partisan manipulation. And I believe that most people see the system in Ohio as working pretty well for them.
But you are under attack by some minority groups when it comes to early voting, and some union groups who feel like, again, by closing the door on certain hours, weekends, the like, that you are playing politics, that you are favoring Republicans. I mean, that's been the criticism.
Well, those are partisan organizations that you're speaking of for the most part, but the rules are quite simple. Frankly, there are 35 days that you can vote by mail without ever leaving your home. There are 35 days you can vote in person, which is 230 hours over the course of 5 weeks and all day on election day. I'm never going to satisfy the partisans. However, for the average person out there, and frankly, even people that have been my critics, once I've had time to sit down with them and explain to them exactly how the rules work, they say, well, that's pretty easy. We perhaps didn't have as much to complain about as we thought.
Let's talk about the absentee ballots. And I know you've sent notices out. I mean, it sounds like to everybody. I mean, even nursing home residents, is that right?
Every single registered voter in the state of Ohio will receive from me an absentee ballot request that if they put in their name, their address, their date of birth, their driver's license number, or the last 4 digits of their social security number and their signature, that then they can request their absentee ballot and their local board of elections will send that out to them and they can vote without ever leaving home.
And what are your reassurances to those folks who may be a little worried about getting lost in the mail perhaps, or not getting to the proper polling place at time of counting? I mean, what?
Well, there's 2 things. First of all, my wife and I are voting by mail, just to let everybody know that what I'm saying is easy and is something that I will do myself. And then additionally, if you want an extra level of security, you can contact your Board of Elections and make sure they've actually received your ballot, and they can document that for you, and you will know that your ballot has not only been cast but been received.
One of our viewers expressed concern in Warren County specifically, but I would think it would apply anywhere else, and that is to nursing home residents, the competency issue. Is that something that's going to take a lot of time for boards of elections to figure out if someone is competent enough to vote? I mean, is that when you send an absentee that way, who's responsible for that portion?
Well, the citizen can themselves be responsible, or if they need assistance, then a Democrat and a Republican from the local board of elections will show up to assist that voter. It is illegal under Ohio law for you to possess or to fill out somebody else's ballot on their behalf unless you have the power of attorney or you have the authority via election law to help them do so. So I am not worried about some of those concerns. We have placed plenty of safeguards in the system to try to account for all of those issues. But that's the balance you have to do. When you're going to make it easier, someone's going to say it's easier to commit fraud as well. And we've tried to create that balance between ease of access and election security. And if you look at the things that we've done to improve the integrity of the system of elections in Ohio, we have removed 150,000 deceased voters from the rolls. There have been hundreds of thousands of duplicate names that have been removed from the rolls. The election system in Ohio is in good a shape as it's ever been and getting better.
At the end of the day, do you think that with all the attention on lawsuits and changing hours and this kind of thing, that's discouraging voters, and that you're not going to see the kind of turnout you would hope for in a presidential election, and with the Senate race up there, and there's some key issues for the state?
I actually think most people think it's pretty easy to vote in Ohio. When I talk to people at the grocery store, or if I run into them at some community event, they say, well, what's the big flap about? It's easy to vote in Ohio. But I think what is discouraging to people is that billions of dollars, or excuse me, what is discouraging to people is that billions of dollars are being spent on negative advertising that make them believe that nobody is worth voting for. Now that's good for your TV station. It's a big revenue booster for the economy in Ohio with all the ad sales that go on. But that's the only good news about it. I think that the tone of campaigns has been the most discouraging thing, not the rules around voting.
Do you feel any pressure from your party, the Republican Party, to do, say, move, be, in terms of your position?
No, I actually don't go to any of the Romney events or do any of the partisan things as a Republican or to the Democrat events for that matter. I try to be as nonpartisan as I can, to explain the facts, to make the rules fair so that people will have confidence in the election system.
But are you hearing from those campaigns?
I don't hear from those campaigns, no.
Okay. You mentioned cost, and I think that's really important because, let's face it, we just saw the issue to change, and I realize your hands were tied, it appears, because that was a court decision. Mm-hmm. But I've talked to one of actually the deputy director of the Montgomery County Board of Elections, and he has indicated to me 5 days of labor were wasted on an issue now that was going to have to be rewritten, and it's probably going to take up more space and more printing and all of that, and that's a cost these counties are going to have to take care of. How do you feel about the cost? Is this going to be the costliest election for Ohio?
Well, as I said, as you create more conveniences for people, there is a cost affiliated with that. We could make elections a lot less costly if we wanted to take away all the early voting opportunities, all of the vote by mail opportunities, and just go back to the old rules where we voted on election day. Frankly, it's not my job to set the rules. My job is to implement the rules. And that's what I've largely attempted to do, is to make sure that everything's fair. We have received a lot of compliments from Democrats and Republicans across the state at the local board level for giving them as much advance notice as we possibly can about what the rules are going to be so that they can prepare for them accordingly. It does obviously make it more difficult on local boards when lawsuits are filed and there are unknowns associated with that based on court rulings, but we do our best to try to get that information to them. But frankly, Montgomery County has really nothing to say, because they've created more cost in past elections for themselves than the state has actually mandated that they provide.
But in terms of cost, again, is it fair to, when a statewide decision is made either by your office or through a court, is it really fair to pass that entire cost on to a county board of elections? Is there a way that the state could supplement? I mean,
we've paid for, I mean, for example, we'll take Montgomery County. In the last election, Montgomery County spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to send out the absentee ballot applications to voters. We've taken that cost off their hands. I'm now sending those absentee ballot requests out from my own office. We have given them money for poll worker training so that we can have the best quality poll workers that we possibly can. At every level, I've tried to take away the cost of operating an election as much as I can from the locals and to assume those at the state level. But unless Ohio law is changed and we take the authority out of the hands of local boards to do these things, there's always going to be that challenge for the state and local governments to work together, just like there are on law enforcement and every other aspect of what we deliver in terms of services to the public.
I'm glad you brought that up. In terms of election reform, I worked in Indiana for a long time, and the Board of Election there in Marion County, Indianapolis, was a 3-member board, so you didn't have to worry about ties. Is it time for Ohio to maybe revisit the makeup of the boards of elections?
Well, we certainly can do that. But there is no magic. Prescription for running an election in a swing state. For example, most of the things that the lawsuits are about have nothing to do with the chief elections officer, myself. It has to do with the law of the state of Ohio. These are court challenges based on the constitutionality of laws that are passed, and it doesn't really matter who your chief elections officer is. It's really the quality of the laws and the activist level that judges want to play in getting involved in running elections in the state of Ohio.
But is it fair to say at the end of the day it's still tough to take the politics out of these boards and the politics out of elections?
Well, of course it is. That's why we have a bipartisan system in Ohio where you have Democrats and Republicans looking over each other's shoulders. I had a question the other day of someone said, hey, is somebody from out of state, I heard an out of state company is going to be counting ballots in Ohio. And I said, no, it's actually going to be your neighbors. It's going to be your local county employees. Those are the people that count the ballots. The people that work at the polls, it's your neighbor, it's your aunt, it's the guy you work with. The people that count ballots on election night, there are 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans at your local board of elections that were selected by your local county parties. So this is really a grassroots system, a bipartisan system that in Ohio has worked very well for over 200 years, and we have been tested time and time again in 2004, in 2008, and now again in 2012 as the critical swing state in the country, and we're passing those tests with flying colors.
Do you see, if it's a close race presidentially, that this is going to go down the wire in Ohio? We may not even have final results right away on that day. It may be days, it may be weeks, challenges. Do you anticipate that kind of thing?
I don't anticipate that kind of thing. Look, how close it is really will make those determining factors, or will play a big role. But with all of the ballots that we expect to receive early, from early voting, mail-in voting, I believe that the early trends will be available as quick as they have ever been in a presidential election in this state. So I don't see this as coming down to the wire at all. I think the reforms we've made in the system are going to make results available more quickly than they've ever been available in the past.
As it stands right now, what was the last directive you gave Board of Election members? Did you say that the 3 days prior to November 6th you could have hours and you would set the hours, or how? Where do we stand?
There has been no direction given to the Board of Elections on that. The federal court judge's ruling is what we're operating under right now. It is under appeal in the Sixth Circuit, and we expect that they will give us an answer about where that will stand in the very near future.
Are they going against your office, however, if they go ahead and plan on those 3 days?
Well, we will be issuing some guidance on that in the very near future.
Based on what happens in court?
Based on the judge's ruling that we need to operate under at that time.
So they need to hold off?
I will be issuing a directive in the near future to comply with the judge's ruling.
I guess I want them to understand what they're supposed to be doing, because I'm even confused as to where it stands now in terms of those 3 days. Other than, of course, military voting, but But what would be appropriate for them to do at this point?
Well, we'll be giving them that guidance.
It hasn't come down yet.
They haven't received.
Stay
anything.
tuned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's right.
And I've got to revisit this because this is the first chance I've had a chance to talk to you directly.
Sure.
And let me just say, Matt McClellan's been very helpful
Good.
in this effort to keep things straight. But the dismissal of the two board members from Montgomery County, Thomas Ritchie and Dennis Lieberman, I was at the meeting where the legal counsel for the board, not their own personal counsel or not the Democratic Party counsel, but the legal counsel for the board indicated there seemed to be some ambiguity with your directive, and for them to go ahead and establish weekend hours or reestablish them as they had already done would not be against your directive necessarily because your directive did not include weekend hours. How do you interpret that? Please help us explain why at the end of the day there had to be this dismissal.
Well, it's very clear about what the rules were. In the 87 other counties across the state, no one misinterpreted it. Everybody got it right because it was clear. And in Montgomery County, those board members were given 3 opportunities to comply with the law. And understand, I want to make this very clear. They're allowed to criticize my decisions, that's fine. But they can't break election law and refuse to implement those orders, because I am responding to the needs of all counties across the state. In many cases, I'm responding directly to the federal courts that are asking me to issue directives to be implemented. And the boards of elections under law are required to implement those directives. And when they take action in direct violation of Ohio law, frankly, I did not want to have to get rid of them. I wanted them to correct their actions and gave them 3 opportunities to do that. But when they refused to do so, I had to take the action that I did, because we cannot have boards of election members breaking Ohio law and refusing to implement very critical pieces of policy that we need to make sure that the elections have integrity, they're run with uniformity and fairness in all 88 counties.
Toughest decision you've had to make?
I don't know if it's the toughest decision that I had to make, but I did not want to have to take that action, but they really left me no other choice.
Another lawsuit, have you been advised as to what has to go forward now in terms of that particular lawsuit?
We will be responding to these issues as we respond to all of them during the elections process, and explaining to the judge exactly why we had to do what we did, and then moving on. I mean, frankly, I'm past this. I have a lot of other bigger issues to deal with than one county. I got a whole state to focus on, and Montgomery County being my home county, where I've lived most of my life, I really regret that it had to happen here.